What happens when a waitress takes the billionaire's son by the hand in the middle of an elite restaurant? You won't believe how that one dance sparks a chain of events that turns an entire corporate empire upside down. At Kingsley's, the kind of restaurant where if you had to ask the price, you didn't belong. Silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It had weight, heavy, stifling, and sometimes cruel. It was the kind of hush that smelled like old money, ivory tablecloth arrogance, and the invisible fingerprints of generational power. And for Diana Johnson, the only black waitress on staff, that silence clung to her like the starch in her uniform. She'd worked there for 5 years, and still, to most customers, she was nothing but a set of gloved hands and a voice that said, "Would you like sparkling or still?" She knew how to glide between tables like smoke, how to vanish just enough not to offend delicate sensibilities. In this place, being seen too clearly could get you seen the wrong way. It was Tuesday. Not just any Tuesday, one of those Tuesdays, the kind where billionaires decided to remember their kids existed. The restaurant buzzed in its polished, whispering way. Lawyers talking mergers, surgeons comparing yachts, startup bros flexing crypto coin. And at table 9, Richard Montgomery himself, the kind of man whose portfolio had its own zip code, sat beside his 10-year-old son, Lucas. Lucas looked like a catalog child designed to wear designer labels. Thin, pale, with hair that had clearly met a private barber. But those leg braces, they told a story no one at the table wanted to talk about. 2 years since the accident, 2 years of silence and therapy, 2 years of not dancing, not laughing, not moving without metal. Diana was setting glasses at the next table when she heard it. Soft, shy, and impossibly brave. "Excuse me, would you dance with me?" She turned. Lucas was standing, wobbly, trembling, hand extended. Every table near them went still. Forks stopped midair. A woman gasped like she'd just seen someone ask for ketchup with steak. And Diana? She froze. Not because of fear, but because she knew what was coming. She didn't even have to turn around to hear him. Manager Thornton, a white man with skin the color of unbaked dough and the smirk of someone born into a golf club, came storming out of the shadows like his name had just been summoned by the audacity in the air. "Sir, control your child," he barked. "This is a restaurant, not a dance hall, and our staff are not here to entertain." Richard didn't answer immediately. He blinked, eyebrows raised, not in surprise but in sheer confusion, like someone had just asked him to do something deeply human. This was the first time he'd taken Lucas out in public since the accident. Every part of his expensive spine screamed, "Sit down, boy." But all he said was, "Lucas, sit." Low, cold, final. But Lucas didn't move. His hand was still out, still trembling, still asking. And that's when Diana did something no one in that room expected. She took off her apron. "My shift is over," she said quietly, placing it on the tray with careful dignity. Then she turned back to Lucas and smiled. "I don't dance in an apron." If you've never heard the sound of a societal rule cracking wide open, that was it. The restaurant didn't gasp. It exhaled, and not one person pulled out a phone. Because in a place like Kingsley's, they didn't record things with cameras. They recorded them with judgment. Richard stood abruptly. "What do you think you're doing?" Diana didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I'm accepting an invitation, sir." She took Lucas's hand. They stepped. The boy dragged one foot forward. Metal scraped. Pain flickered across his face. But Diana didn't rush him, didn't lead him. She matched him, step for step. His rhythm became hers. A woman in the corner whispered, "She's definitely getting fired." Richard watched, not blinking, not breathing. And in the boy's hesitant steps, something stirred. He remembered Elizabeth, his late wife, dancing barefoot in the kitchen with Lucas, back when braces were for teeth, not legs. Back when joy was effortless. "It's not about being perfect," she used to say. "It's about being present." When the song ended, 3 shaky steps later, Diana gently led Lucas back to the table. She knelt slightly, looked him in the eye. "Thank you for asking me to dance," she said. "It was an honor." She turned to leave. Then came Richard's voice. "Wait!" Diana stopped mid-step, her heart pounding, but her face composed. "What's your full name?" he asked. "Diana Johnson." He pulled a business card from his jacket and extended it. "My office. Tomorrow, 10 a.m." The room held its breath like it had been sucker punched. Diana took the card. Her hand trembled, just slightly, but her face, calm. And Lucas, he turned to his father, brows furrowed with something close to defiance. "Why did you do that?" Richard couldn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because for the first time in 2 years, he looked at his son and didn't see a diagnosis. He saw a boy with a voice, a will, a soul. Diana stepped out into the New York night. The wind kissed her cheek like it knew, like it had watched from the window and whispered, "You just rewrote someone's story." She didn't know if she'd still have a job tomorrow. She didn't know what Richard wanted from that meeting, but she knew this much. For the first time in a long time, she had done something right. Not safe, not smart. Right. No permission, no apology, just because it mattered. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it all unfolded. The next morning, Diana Johnson stood in the marbled atrium of Montgomery Tower, a glass and steel giant that seemed to stretch up into the clouds and price itself beyond gravity. The air didn't just smell of air conditioning. It smelled like old contracts, high-stakes bets, and privilege sealed in mahogany. Men floated past in suits the color of bank accounts, clutching leather folios thick with mergers and quarterly lies. Their faces didn't wrinkle. Their eyes didn't flicker. These weren't people, not really. They were statements. And there she stood, in her best blouse, one she bought during an end-of-season clearance when her checking account gasped. Shoulders square, chin lifted, a worn leather purse under one arm, inside, a printout resume, a dog-eared notebook, and just enough confidence to make it through the lobby. "Diana Johnson to see Mr. Montgomery," she said at the front desk. The receptionist didn't flinch, but her eyes scanned Diana like she was a glitch in the code. The type of woman you didn't expect to see requesting an appointment with the man whose last bonus could feed a small country. "Take the elevator to 18, she replied monotone, perfect hair unmoving. "Ms. Winters will meet you." Diana stepped into the elevator. Classical music trickled from invisible speakers, not soothing, but clinical. Music meant for people who invested in pharmaceutical companies, not people who had to choose between groceries and rent. As the elevator crawled up the floors like it owed someone a favor, she looked at her reflection in the mirrored panel. Didn't flinch, didn't blink. The doors opened. Ms. Winters stood at the threshold like a mannequin brought to life by corporate disapproval. Pencil skirt, ice-cold posture, heels that sounded like courtroom gavels on the floor. "Right this way," she said. "Mr. Montgomery is finishing a call." They walked down a hallway so pristine, it looked like you'd get sued just for breathing too hard. The walls gleamed, the kind of sterile shine you see in money laundering movies. Every few steps, someone in a tailored suit glanced up. Diana caught it in their faces, that nanosecond of surprise. She wasn't pushing a cart, wasn't holding coffee, wasn't typing behind a receptionist desk. She was walking like she belonged, and that fried the circuits of at least 3 executives who didn't know how to process it. "Did he fire you already?" Winters asked, breaking the silence with the elegance of a falling bookcase. Diana turned slightly. "Excuse me?" "I mean, it's common. When clients complain, we usually part ways with the staff, especially those like you." Winters said it casually, like someone mentioning the weather, like someone explaining how rain simply falls on some people more than others. "Those like me?" Diana raised an eyebrow. Winters paused. Realized too late. "I mean, hospitality staff, not, you know." "Oh, I know," Diana said with a smile sharp enough to slice through pretense. "You meant exactly what you said." Before Winters could cobble together a response, the phone on the desk rang. "He's ready for you now." Montgomery's office looked less like a workplace and more like a private observatory for power. The floor-to-ceiling windows stared out over the city like it was a chessboard. Every skyscraper a pawn, every person below just another square. And there he stood, Richard Montgomery, crisp, perfectly still, looking out like he owned the view. "Ms. Johnson," he said, finally turning. "Please." Diana sat, not on the edge of the chair like someone begging for a chance. She sat back, straight spine, calm eyes, palms open, like someone who knew exactly what she was worth, even if the room hadn't figured it out yet. Montgomery watched her for a moment. It was a game, the silence, a trap. Executives like him didn't ask questions. They laid bait and waited for you to say too much. Diana didn't bite. "You went to school?" he asked finally. "Bachelor's in Child Development from NYU, she said. "Didn't finish my master's. Life got in the way." He nodded slowly, like the puzzle was starting to assemble. Then he pulled a folder off a shelf. A real one, not a tablet, not a screen, a thick manila folder with her name on the tab. "You co-founded a center, Freedom Steps, for kids with physical disabilities." "With my sister," she said, "6 years ago. It's barely staying afloat." "You work 2 jobs, weekends at a bookstore, weeknights as a tutor. You've been passed over for promotion 5 times at Kingsley's. You earn less than what we spend on office espresso pods." "You've done your homework," she said flatly. "I had to," he said. "You danced with my son." He didn't say it like it was a compliment or an accusation. He said it like a confession. Lucas has had the best specialists, doctors, therapists. They've thrown charts and theories at him for years, but none of them did what you did in 10 minutes. You didn't coddle him. You didn't correct him. You let him lead. That's not therapy. That's connection. And connection, Ms. Johnson, can't be bought. Diana stayed silent because she knew what was coming next. "I want you to work with him," Montgomery said. She didn't smile, didn't flinch. "As a waitress?" she asked, dry. "No," he said. "As a rehabilitation consultant, therapeutic companion. Call it what you want. The salary would triple what you make now." "Why me?" she asked. He took a breath, long, real. "Because when he looks at you, he smiles. And because I finally realized I've been looking at my son as a burden for 2 years. You helped me see he's not broken. He's just waiting." Downstairs in the lobby, Thornton stood near the security desk. He saw her before she saw him, and when she walked past, no apron, no tray, just her, he straightened up like he had something left to protect. "Johnson, what are you doing here?" She didn't break stride. "Working," she said, "for now." That evening, Diana walked down 125th Street. Harlem pulsed around her. Music from a block party, stores closing for the night, the smell of shea butter and sidewalk grills. Something inside her felt different. Not pride, not victory. Stability. Real, grown woman certainty. Like the world had been testing her for years, and she'd finally handed it back a grade. And for the first time all day, she allowed herself to smile. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for is about to land. Stick around. The best part is yet to come. 3 weeks later. At exactly 9:55 a.m., Diana Johnson stepped into the lobby of Montgomery Tower. No longer as a server, not as a guest, but as an employee. Her new badge gleamed against the lapel of her blazer. Diana Johnson, rehabilitation consultant. The security scanner gave a crisp green flash. The guard by the elevator nodded, not dismissively, but with respect. That respect? She earned it, step by deliberate step. The first days felt like a dream. Lucas, the boy with braces and a gaze that used to trail the floor like shadows, was changing. He wasn't just moving to music again. He was speaking, laughing, asking questions, even giving orders. Quietly, but with growing strength. Yesterday, he stood up unassisted and reached for the remote himself. "I can do it," he'd said, not in defiance, in determination. And when Richard saw it, the man who once held boardrooms in his grip simply sat on the edge of the couch, frozen, like numbers and net worth had vanished, and all that remained was a sun standing tall. But corporate darkness doesn't die quietly. Thornton, remember him? The manager who once acted like Kingsley's was his fiefdom, wasn't finished. He came back with emails, online accusations, whispers dressed as concern. Then he escalated. A formal complaint was filed with the company board. Montgomery had hired an unqualified woman into a therapeutic role, misusing company resources for personal reasons. And worse, a leak to the press. The headline exploded across certain circles like dry kindling under flame. Black waitress in billionaire's office. Compassion or corruption? Now came the internal hearing. A boardroom. 10 men in dark suits. 9 white, 1 Asian. All equally polished, equally practiced in the art of appearing unbiased. Sharks in ties. Diana got the summons, didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her response was short. I'll be there. The morning of the hearing, the sky was gray. The kind of gray that makes cities feel older, colder. But Diana wasn't gray, not one bit. She walked into the tower with quiet fire. She wore a gray suit, not new but pressed so perfectly it dared anyone to question it. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. In her hands, a folder, not of apologies, of facts. She stepped into the boardroom on the 27th floor like it belonged to her ancestors. All heads turned. That silence again. But this time it didn't weigh her down. It parted like curtains. Thornton sat on one side, no longer smug, no longer armed with authority, just a folder of accusations and a pinched expression. Across from him stood Richard, not seated with the board. He stood beside Diana, not behind her, beside, as support, as witness, as father. Harold Blake, the silver-haired chairman, cleared his throat. Ms. Johnson, we're here to examine the validity of your appointment and your qualifications. Some believe your hire was a result of Mr. Montgomery's personal biases, not professional judgment. Diana didn't miss a beat. I understand, she said, voice steady. It's always a shock when a black woman walks into a room not to serve wine, but to serve knowledge. Blake's eyes narrowed. Let's begin with your background. She stepped forward and spoke with clarity. Bachelor's degree in child development from New York University. 78 credits toward a master's in special education. Over 200 hours of voluntary work with children diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Co-founder of Freedom Steps, a dance-based rehabilitation center where 94% of the children are differently abled. 6 years of hands-on experience. Here are just a few case studies with medical records and progress videos. I've highlighted a boy named Jaden Miller, nonverbal at age 8. Now, he raps in class. She laid down the documents, and that's just one of many. One board member leaned forward. If that's your resume, how did you end up waiting tables? Diana looked directly at him. Have you ever walked into an interview and seen the rejection already on someone's face before you even sat down? I've sent out over 50 applications, including to your own HR department, not a single response. Pause. Until I danced with your CEO's son? Richard shifted. The board exchanged glances. Blake gestured to him. Mr. Montgomery? Richard stepped forward. I was the one who saw her as just a waitress. I raised my son with all the money in the world and no emotional clarity. She showed me something no degree had, that my son didn't need pity. He needed to be heard. I didn't hire her because she's black, or because I felt guilty. I hired her because, for the first time in 2 years, my son wanted to live. Silence, the room stilled. If you believe hiring her was wrong, Richard added, you can remove us both. And that's when the dam cracked. Thornton jumped up like a wire had snapped. This is emotional manipulation. She's unlicensed. She didn't complete internal certification. You're right, Diana said calmly, because your certification filters are designed to keep people like me from ever getting close to the starting line. She opened her folder again. Here's a 5-year breakdown of your corporate training admissions. Out of 412 employees accepted, 396 were white, 9 were black. None of those 9 were promoted. That's not merit, that's pattern. She looked each board member in the eye. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to tell you, the system you defend, It's leaking. One dance with a boy shouldn't be the only way a qualified black woman gets through your door. But if that's how it started, then so be it. Let this be the first ripple. The verdict came 48 hours later. Diana Johnson was confirmed in her role, officially and fully. Not only that, she was invited to co-develop the company's first inclusive development initiative aimed at real measurable equity in recruitment and advancement. Thornton resigned. No farewell party, no glowing announcement, just a quiet HR note, violated company values on diversity and fairness. That evening, Diana stood by the window in her new office. The skyline didn't look like an obstacle anymore. It looked like possibility. On her desk sat a card, handmade, scribbled in blue crayon. "Thank you for not letting go of my hand, Lucas." She looked down at the city, the streets where she once carried trays to men who now opened doors for her, and she laughed, softly, not with bitterness, with dignity. Because now when someone said, "Black waitress," it wasn't an insult. It was a legacy. If this story moved you, know that it's not the end. There are millions of women like Diana, and each one has the power to change everything. One step, one voice, one dance at a time.